Just while our candidates are assembling there, I'll just formally begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people, traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Just firstly, my name's Gary Shadforth. I'm heading up the Cremorne Community Inc. So in case you haven't come across us, we're just a little community-based group, and we set up just a couple of years ago because of all the activity that started burgeoning along, and we thought we'd really wanted to be part of all the decision-making that was going on. So we've become a bit more active. We try to get some input into decisions or things that are not being done. But certainly we have more clout with the powers that be if people are joining up or are members. So cremorne.org.au, we've got a few membership flyers around if you want to grab one. We are non-aligned. We don't have any political dog in the race, so we don't expect to be endorsing any one particular candidate over the other. So this is purely a community service. So please take advantage of what you'll be asked to do this month. You'll be getting a ballot, and you'll have till the 25th to fill it in. So what we'll be doing is asking each of these candidates one by one to come up to the microphone. Each one will have a minute and a half and to answer each of a series of set questions. From there, we'll invite people on the floor, and we might have time for maybe 5 questions or so from the floor, but each of those questions will be addressed to all of the candidates. So the candidates each have equal time on every question that's asked. So we don't have any opportunity to focus on any one candidate who either cops all the criticism or gets all the praise. So everyone gets equal billing. While I'm welcoming people, special plug to the Cherry Tree. So if you haven't been here before, or if this is a first occasion, feel free to indulge in the future. One of the better pubs around town. And again, welcome to our candidates. And our candidates are Thihan Chandramohan, Sam Poustie, John Bric, Vicki Redwood, and Theresa Saldanha. And we might start with Theresa being first at this end, but this is the easy bit. The first question will simply be to introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And I'll start timing as soon as I get to my table.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Theresa Saldanha, long-term resident of 3121, 20 years almost going on. My background is university lecturer, consultant, worked in big corporations, managed big budgets. My superpower, if you can call it that, is getting things done. As you would expect, being a consultant and a university lecturer, I can't get away with not getting things done. Now, in terms of council, like most people, I wouldn't pay attention to council at all. But the last 4 years have changed that. And one of the things is people say, why do you want to run for council? My issue is that I end up complaining. And one thing I hate is a whiner. So I don't want to be complaining for the next 4 years. So what is it that I've been doing? In the last 4 years, I've represented 3121 in terms of pushing back on rate hikes, talking about bin tax, pushing back on council spins. I want to do more. I want to hold this council and our entire council responsible for better services for 3121. I think we are being shortchanged. We take a lot of the growth, but we don't get the infrastructure, whether it's open space, libraries, services. And if I think 3121 as in Richmond is deprived, it's even worse down here, because in Cremorne, council points a finger at state, state points a finger at council, nothing gets done. So that's what I want to do. I basically want to get things done, which is why I'm standing for council.
Hello, I'm Vicki Redwood, and I've been... I'm sorry, I'll turn it around. Okay, is that better? Good. I'm Vicki Redwood, and I've been a Richmond resident. I'm just over Church Street, so I'm sorry I'm not truly in Cremorne. For about 12 years, we built our house then and our home, and I have been in the IT industry for 50 years. And to give that background, I have actually delivered with teams of wonderful Australian people, best in world and world firsts and Australian first systems, like the first e-payment gateway for all, actually the local governments in Australia and the state government here in Victoria. And around the world, we've done the biggest software product ever delivered, ever sold out of Australia. And so all of these things have proven to me that success of those products being first, best, very different and new are never the technology problems, never the skills of the people, never the capabilities of and the timings. Instead, it's governance, and it fails every single time, and that fails the project. So that's what I'm standing for.
Hello everyone, I'm John Bric. I'm a journalist by trade, business owner, also been a resident in the Lennox ward for almost 20 years now. Started off just over there in Dover Street as a tenant for about 10 years, and more recently just apartment owner in Richmond Hill. So look, I work in Richmond. My partner has a business here in Cremorne. I'm here pretty much every day. So 3121 and Cremorne has a very special place in my heart. And that's part of the reason sort of I'm running in this election. For me, I feel like we've been shortchanged over the past few years. I feel like Cremorne in particular has been ignored by council, and I feel like council haven't been doing their job. For me, a councillor is someone who should be listening to the residents, to the business owners and to their constituents. And from that point onwards, they should be acting upon those interests the best way they can. And I don't think that's happening at the moment, okay? I don't think the current council is putting the interests of their constituents first, and I think there needs to be some change. So I could be sitting at home right now complaining about the current situation we're in, or I could throw my hat into the rink, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. I think over the next couple of hours, hopefully you get to find out more about my policies and where I stand on this one, but I would like to see some current change at the moment and see 3121 turn into the better place that it should be. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Sam Poustie. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country which we're meeting on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to them, their elders past and present. As far back as I can remember, I've been looking after the environment, understanding the consequences on future generations if we don't. I think I was about 11 when I decided to turn an old recycling container into an open rainwater tank and at the front of our home in Mitcham. Then in high school it was the solar car competition, which solidified my decision to study electrical engineering, and I currently work as an engineer helping to lead a team of software developers create software that avoids bushfire starts by power lines. My ambition for making positive changes to the environment and to people's lives spills out of my work life, and in 2021 my housemate Jarman and I launched NEMI, which is a free app that helps you use electricity at environmentally friendly times, thus accelerating the transition to 100% renewable energy and saving people money if your plan allows for it. I'm an active member of the queer community, having been involved in Surge that meets here, Melbourne's gay water polo club. That was where I met my partner, Sean. We were together for several years, but at the end of 2022, he passed away after a 2.5-year battle with a rare form of liver cancer. I'd been his carer during his illness, and that profound experience of care, made me want to care for the community more broadly. And we'll finish there. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. My name's Thihan. Thanks for everyone coming out tonight on a Wednesday. I'm a physiotherapist by training, and I've been living in Richmond for the last sort of 8 years, and in Yarra for about 20. And I've been really lucky. I've worked in sport, in professional sport for the last 15 years. But in January this year, on New Year's Eve, I got hit by a motorbike while I was working overseas and broke my leg. And I'm very fortunate. I got to come home and get looked after in Richmond at the Epworth and got my leg fixed. But also, I got to spend a lot of time wandering around the streets as part of my rehab. And the great thing about that was I got to engage with my community, where usually I fly in, fly out, love getting off the plane and coming into the island, and feel really comfortable when I cross that bridge off the freeway. But the thing I really found was engaging with cafes that were greater and greater distances from my house, as my distance that I could walk got further, was I found a lot of frustration, a lot of challenges for people both in the community, small business owners, because they weren't getting the support from the council that they should get. And in doing that, I kind of found this moment where I went, well, I've been complaining about it. I've been engaging with some of the issues that have popped up over the time, things like our access to green spaces, some of the decisions we're making about some of our budgetary decisions by the council. And I thought, well, why? I've got a great skill set in governance, in managing systems, in leading teams and getting results in teams. Why can't I take those skill sets and put that to work for my community? So the big thing for me is really about making sure that there's communication. And I think the biggest issue we've had with our council in the last 4 years is poor communication. And I think I bring that to the table in spades. Thank you.
Right, thank you, each of you. Just before I jump to the first of the set questions, I omitted to mention the 2 candidates that are not with us. Both have sent their apologies and have sent through some feedback that I'll pass around, or at least put on the cremorne.org.au website. That's Andrew Davies and Peter Razos. So both of them have other commitments, so they did say they'd prefer to be here if they had their others. The 5 questions I'm going to put through are all deliberately Lennox related. So even though obviously Cremorne.org comes from this particular part of the municipality, the questions are going to be pitched to cover Lennox-wide, so Richmond Hill, South Richmond, and the parts of Richmond that are included in Lennox. Each of the questions will be themed, but they're crafted so that each of the candidates have been invited to pretty much interpret that theme as they like. So they're not confined to the literal question, so they can expand a little bit where they feel fit. So, Vicki, you'll be the first one this time. And the question is, and the theme is about traffic and movement and parking. How would you resolve traffic and movement issues in Lennox Ward, including congestion, pedestrian access, safety, and competition for parking? 1.5 minutes again.
How much?
1.5 minutes.
Okay, same again. Okay, there's first of all, we have to get the data about what is the problem. Because you talk to people and they say it's the parking, it's this, it's the other, and they do overlap, then the services we have to provide do overlap. So we need the data, first of all, once again, about governance. Then there's 3 major areas. If it's parking, we really have to get some innovative compliance solutions about parking. How many car permits are even issued at this stage in Yarra? We're not given those figures in any way whatsoever. Maybe there isn't a problem. We can easily compare them to the number of off-street or on-street parking places? How many people have registered cars in Yarra? How much are we talking about through traffic that are driving through Yarra to come out the other side? And it is traffic flow that is the problem. We saw this in the Charlotte Street Pocket Park, the closure for just a test, yet there was no measurements of the effect on every other street, Charles Street, which is only about 3 or 4 metres wide, and the flow through traffic. So is that the problem, and what's the data? Only then can we look at solutions for them. But we must get that governance of accountability, responsibility and data to find what our problem is. Finally, I've got a narrow street. If a normal large four-wheel drive that's got the mirrors for a caravan attached to them, I end up with a 20-centimetre footpath. My house is on the road. That is a safety issue and a traffic issue. So that is the areas that I want to really cover by getting data.
Okay, so Cremorne's in a bit of a tough situation at the moment. We've got about 50% of people that come to this municipality driving in and then leaving, okay? A lot of people that come in for the day and work due to this massive commercial hub right now, they drive their cars in from 9 to 5, we're fighting for car parks, and then they leave. We need to find a way to get this 50% riding their bikes more, catching public transport more, and walking more. How do we do that? In my opinion, we have to start with the surfaces. The roads, the footpaths, have a look around. There's potholes everywhere, there's uneven surfaces. Whoever's working for the council at the moment in terms of keeping them smooth and clear, they're not doing a good enough job. The repair work's been patchy at best, and it's very dangerous for cyclists. I personally know cyclists who have ended up in hospital from riding. They're not hitting cars, they're hitting potholes. Okay, we need to fix the surfaces. Then we need to connect Cremorne to the bike path. There's an amazing bike path right there behind the Yarra. As in Cremorne, to get to that is a nightmare. We need to find a way to get a bridge over, maybe something under the ground to get us connected to that bike path and allow bikes to come into Cremorne a lot easier. On top of that, we need to address the constant construction work taking place in Cremorne. At times in the past couple of months, I've seen 15 construction works taking place at the same time. We need someone in government, in council, monitoring that, coordinating it and making sure there's X amount at any given time as a cap. We can't have 15 construction works detouring people into the same pocket and people just getting lost, all right? We need to address that. Only then, when we get our roads clear, connect to the bike path, have less construction, we can then think about speed limits. Thank you.
I think the main thing is to provide some desirable alternatives to driving. So I recently spent a couple of months in Berlin. I was able to take long service leave, and I observed that most people get around on public transport by bike and by foot. And people are very happy to do these things. More public land is dedicated to safe walking and cycling, and thus removing a key barrier to people is, that's one of the most important things, for them to feel safe on the road. And I observe families cycling to school together, and I'd love for the majority of people in Lennox to feel safe on a bike. And so it's about encouraging people to leave their car at home or move from 2 to 1 car households, or get rid of the car entirely, which of course will have cost of living benefits. We need to increase the footpath width. We need to improve pedestrian safety through making non-compliant crossings compliant, such as just outside the Cherry Tree on Balmain, and further west at the intersection of Balmain, Cremorne and Gough Streets. We need to create more separated bike lanes, and I think we need to charge workers in Cremorne a fair price for parking. I think that needs to be part of the solution, because in my mind it doesn't make sense to offer free parking when it costs $10 a day to use public transport.
I love this question because we all have issues. Cremorne is a very famous place for trying to get a car park. If you try to drive here today, we've got 4-hour parks on this side, we've got no parking on that side. If you know that, you know where the 4-hour parks are. If you don't, you're going to be driving around for a while. And so having that information available to the council would be really useful. And we know that there's technology available, used around the world in other cities in Australia, that uses that technology to make decisions based on the usability of the system. The big thing we also know is incentives drive behaviour. And so if we're talking about reducing use of cars, improving use of public transport, making it easier to walk around. We need to incentivise that. We need to make it easier for people. And some of the things that some of our other candidates have talked about are definitely things we need to look at. But the most important thing we need to do is talk to the people who live here and the businesses that are here and find out what they need and what's working for them and what's not working for them. And I think the biggest issue we have is there's a lot of information available. If you go online, you can read, as I said, I sat around on my ass for 9 months with a broken leg. I read pretty much every document that's available. There is so much information that's in there that we're not using. I guarantee you it's not being used. So we need to take those documents. We don't need to go and do more information searching. We need to go and take those documents, talk to the residents, talk to the businesses, and find out what they want. And then as a council, as a person whose job is to represent the needs of the residents and the businesses, execute those things. That's the job. So my job will be to do that. Thank you.
Okay. I'm all about the evidence, and let's look at the numbers. As a municipality, we are going to have to grow by about 50%. We currently have about 46,000 homes. That's going to double by 2051. Where do we put these people? A lot of that is going to be along this corridor, rail corridor, Victoria Street, was going to take a lot of that, those homes. And to do that, we need to look at how people use transport. We're lucky that 50% work from home. Those are the numbers. However, 30% use public transport. That is your first start in terms of improving traffic. I'm a marketer. It's all about encouraging people to do the right thing, and we have to get better public transport. Take a look at Cremorne. You've got the Glen Huntly line. Comes in at peak every 10 minutes, while the other lines coming in on Burnley are much faster, 4 minutes. We need to basically talk to state about getting better public transport in terms of our rail, getting better connections in terms of walking from stations to our hubs to be able, for this area, to move away from things like cars. In terms of parking and permits, again, it's about encouraging people to use other modes, not trying to punish them. And it's about first pavements and getting pavements right, which is what a lot of people have focused on.
Thank you all. The next question is on the theme of space as opposed to movement and traffic. And it goes, what opportunities do you see for creating additional public spaces in Lennox ward? John.
Okay, so public spaces in Cremorne. I think it's very clear that Cremorne's been neglected. Lennox, my apologies. Lennox ward. Norris, I'll get to that. We are in the Lennox ward, of course, but I'm talking about Cremorne specifically at the moment because I think it has been neglected more than any other sort of area in 3121 when it comes to public open spaces, all right? I think that we need to look outside the square, though, of not just pocket parks that we've put up recently in these areas, right? We need to think outside the square. I know community groups have spoken about the Kangan Institute. They've also spoken about potentially the Malt District at areas. I think we need to do better than that, though. We are right here at the fingertips, have some of the most innovative thinkers, all right? We are home to the Silicon Cremorne, they call it. Very advanced thinkers. Let's tap into those minds. Let's tap into the residents, the business owners, and let's think outside the square. Why can't we have some open spaces on rooftops enjoying some of the best views? Why can't future developers have a clause meaning they need to offer some public spaces above the development on the rooftop or underneath it? Why can't we utilise the Birrarung Yarra area over there and have some floating public spaces? We need to think outside the square at the moment and not just think about demolishing buildings, taking away car parks and putting public spaces. We need to be innovative thinkers that will complement the area that we're in.
My opinion is the council needs to aggressively pursue strategic opportunities to acquire or lease land for more parks and more open spaces. For example, there's a big rail corridor going through much of Lennox ward, and I think the land is being underutilised. So I'd be interested in working more closely with VicTrack and applying political pressure if necessary in order to unlock land for public parks and for people to enjoy. I think the council also needs to consider strategically closing streets to create more public space for people to enjoy, such as right outside Richmond Library on Charlotte Street. Like most of the community, I'm a big supporter of the Charlotte Street Pocket Park, and I think we should see many more of them across the ward. I know a lot of these park proposals are council officer initiated, and I want to see more community initiated parks become developed. So if I'm elected, I'm very keen to hear ideas about where you think we should be creating more public space in Richmond and Cremorne. Thank you.
We all know that Lennox has the lowest percentage of green space in Yarra, and that's a massive issue. We also know that the council has set aside open space levies that have been collected from all the developments that have occurred, especially in our area, and haven't spent that money on anything particularly useful that I've seen in the last 10 years. And so the big thing for me is going, okay, a lot of that information, again, is available. We know there's projects that need to be done. The things that really will drive, again, incentive for people to engage with this process is giving them engagement in the communication about it, making sure that if there are issues, the classic line, you can't please everyone all the time, is making sure people understand why some of these spaces have been used. We have limited options at times, but the challenge as a council and as a councillor is to be able to make that understood to everyone, and then it's about action. It's about getting these things off the ground and completed. And I find that when these things get done, that then you get people engaged in the process and hopefully can look for other options as we go along. So for me as a councillor, the job is to look, as I said, the information's available. All of the work's been done. It's about actually deciding and showing people what is possible and what we can actually achieve, and then actually doing it. And I think the biggest issue for our council at the moment is there's a lot of talking and not a lot of action. Thank you.
Open space. Since the 1900s, Richmond probably hasn't, in some people's eyes, been an open space village. So the big problem now is, yes, you might not be able to look straight ahead, but when you have to look up, literally vertically because of high rise, then you know you have no open space. So why don't we keep the developers to the rules we make? If it's 8 floors, it's 8 floors. It's not start with 14. Then the bylaws should be strong enough to say it's 8 floors, because that started with a state government issue. They said it would be 8 floors for the LGR, and we say it's 8 floors. If you can't build and make a profit on 8 floors, bad luck, go somewhere else. You don't go to VCAT, you don't go to the minister, because the law is, the bylaw is 8 floors. Or something like that. But constantly we have the ambit claims we take notice of. With regard to pocket parks, we really can't have a mantra about them if more people are hurt, and from safety, from health, from 100 other reasons, and fear and ruining their lives, than the people that are benefiting from that pocket park. We had no metrics from the test of Charlotte Street Pocket Park. If they call it a test, they have to say what the metrics are and did it do the advantages it was meant to do. But no, in the report that was going to council a week later, and I wasn't either side, no metrics were given on was it a success or not. So that is a very poor outcome.
Okay, let's get back to evidence-based. Cremorne has 2% open space. Across the road, the area that has Charlotte Street Park, 12%. North Richmond, 9%. We need to be spending our money in areas that need the open space. Cremorne is one of them. Now, in terms of where to put the open space, along the railway lines, along the river, you've got unused land that is capable of being developed. If you ask me, Charlotte Street Pocket Park, right initiative, wrong area. It should have been the other side of the road around the railway line in Cremorne. And that's the other issue that we need to look at is developer funds. Developer funds have increased, which is great for open space. However, the way we look at where we invest developer funds needs a rethink. The reason why we were looking at Charlotte Street is because it was mapped into an area across Swan Street. So some of these things need a rejig in terms of looking at where we need open space and putting those initiatives into where open space is required. So I buy into what John said about getting the community involved. The community is key. We cannot keep imposing things on the community.
Thank you all. Question 4 is related to building and developments. Lennox Ward, again, contains a varied mix of residential and commercial properties with a recent and growing inclusion of large multi-storey developments. What tensions or opportunities do you see here, and how would you address them? Sam.
First, I'd like to address a really practical issue, which is just around the construction noise and the volume of large trucks that are affecting our streets of Cremorne. I think it would be a good idea to enforce the curfews to make sure that large trucks are travelling and the noise is only occurring during reasonable times. As when I've been door knocking and talking to people, that's a really practical concern that people have raised with me. And having lived in on a street going up a hill, I know that, for instance, when the garbage trucks are coming along, they are very noisy, and so operating in reasonable hours, I think, is a sensible thing to do. I'm a big fan of mixed-use development, and so if elected, I'll be looking for genuine mixed-use outcomes, such as vertical zoning, which is with commercial on the lower levels and residential above. I think it's great that Cremorne has plenty of office space. It provides opportunities to live and work in the same great place. I would also be holding the state government to account for their existing open space commitments that they've not yet fulfilled. And I guess a recent win from the last term of council was an almost doubling of the developer contributions to open space, and I'll fiercely advocate for that money to be spent in the ward, especially the concrete jungle that is Cremorne.
Having seen the growth in our both high-rise developments for commercial and for residential across the whole of Lennox, all the way down Swan Street and Church, as well as into this area, the big thing we know is that if you give an inch, most people take a mile. And the job of the council is to work with residents and commercial developers to make sure that the rules are followed, that they're executed correctly, and that there's clear communication again with residents about what's going on. And I think a lot of the time at the moment, things are happening, and I can see that from where I am on the other side of Church Street, that it's really difficult at times because no one knows what's going on. So the key point for me is making sure that the communication with the builders, the construction people, as well as the developers themselves about high-rise building is done at the time of the building happening, and then strategically making sure that there's a plan with how those things are implemented. We know that it's really hard for developers to engage in Yarra. They find it very difficult. I've spoken to quite a few of them over the last couple of months, and a lot of them avoid coming here, and some of the really good ones avoid coming here because it is so difficult. We want really high quality developments. We want people who are engaged with community, and if they don't want to come here because it's too hard, because the council are making it difficult, we're going to get the lesser option. We're going to get people who aren't engaged. And so that's a challenge for the council, is to do that, is to make sure that we're actually providing a service that actually encourages high quality development rather than the bottom of the barrel. Thank you.
For me, in terms of development, I look to see where's best-in-class examples, and one of that is Fitzroy. The key there is the Fitzroy community is highly engaged in terms of development. One thing that brought it home to me is flammable cladding as an issue in big developments doesn't exist in Fitzroy. Why? Because the community gets involved with development right from the right from the start. A great example of a development, Gasworks. Community was involved, great development in terms of housing. great open spaces, great facilities. Those are the kind of developments we want. So we need the community involved to get the developments that add to a suburb, but also create homes that are livable for new residents coming in. The second thing is the planning scheme itself lacks certain detail in terms of what do we want our suburbs to look like. We need to be a lot more detailed in terms of what does that look like, what do laneways look like, because without that we cannot build the kind of accessible neighborhoods that we want. So two parts, community and ensuring that our planning schemes are detailed enough to put in that detail of what we want our suburbs to be like. That's me.
We have visions, we have frameworks, we have mission statements, we have then eventually plans. The problem is our plans are no more than a repeat of the vision, the mission and strategy statements. Again and again, they don't get resourced, they don't have actual true timelines. We've got a plan just came out recently that's going to deliver at the end of 2024, and it came out a month ago. And we've had no phase. It's been 3 years in the making, and really it is a vision statement. It has, as I said, no resourcing associated with, no financial commitments to it, no, and this goes on and on and on. The framework for Cremorne must have been revised God knows how many times over the last years, but what action has actually come out? Documents called action plans come out, but they have no schedules, they have no deliverables, they have no actuals. And this is once again a governance issue, because there is risk that will never happen, and that is a compliance risk, and eventually you'll be put into administration if you're just wasting money on these plans. Thank you.
Okay, so tensions when it comes to developments in all wards are pretty common. I mean, it comes down to residents being annoyed because car parks get taken away. There's obviously noise and disruptions. Your views are gone, and sunlight into your own home is taken away. So the tensions are there. We know about that, right? How do we find an opportunity to make residents and stakeholders happy? Obviously, public consultation is important. We need to make sure that residents, business owners get a chance to have their input, right? Why can't we make provisions in the Lennox ward when it comes to developments having to tick certain boxes? Why can't we say, obviously, parking's a problem in a certain area, let's make sure future developments have underground parking to cater for that. Maybe it's a case of, okay, you can have your building here, but we want to make sure the bottom part's for retail. I'm sure that residents are way more happy knowing that buildings and developments might have a swimming pool, maybe they've got a gym, a cafe, a hairdresser down the bottom than they would if it was just an office space, right? We also need to offer some residents back into that as well. So maybe it's 50-50. There's opportunities for residents to have a say in some of these consultations at the moment, and I think we need to have more of a say to make sure that we utilise the strengths that we can from our people and make sure that we're not just robbing them of their own area. And that's what I'm thinking at the moment. There's obvious tensions. Let's make sure we try to provide the residents with the best outcome possible. Thank you.
Thank you again to each of you. Question 5 is a planning theme question. I've included a little Cremorne bit, but it can be applied generally. There is currently a draft urban design framework for Cremorne. What would you prioritise in it? And also, what would you apply to other parts of the Lennox ward that might be included?
Thanks, Gary. So the specific question was about the urban design framework for Cremorne, which is actually a really good document. It's actually got a lot of detail in it. You don't have to waste your time reading it. But the general summary is it's about sustainable development, it's about public space management and enhancing the transport connectivity, as well as supporting businesses, especially this sort of our burgeoning digital space. So the priorities for me would be really about addressing access, especially with access to things like the river, access to the stations, East Richmond and Richmond Station, and making sure that those spaces for both pedestrians and cyclists are safe and accessible. And that's for the whole of the ward. I've got a lot of friends who work in Cremorne but live on the other side of Church Street, and the commute is longer than it's a bike ride. So we need to make sure that's a safe way for people to travel. The other thing that's really important with this process is making sure that the initiatives that we've got for some of the parts of the plan that are about green spaces are supported by state government. Remember, there's also an overarching plan that comes from the state government that this planning comes from, and that should be funded by them. And so the council needs to be making sure that they are advocating for the ward and for the city to make sure that the state government is living up to their basic program and providing us with funds to execute some of these things, so it's not just falling on ratepayers to pay for these things, but it's actually supporting the whole of Victoria, not just our city. So we need to make sure we're getting that support from the government. That's the job of the council, is to advocate for this, for the city to the state. Thank you.
Okay, I think I can leave the whole, Cremorne urban framework. It's a great idea on paper. The things missing to me is it's a great idea that isn't executed well. And to me, the thing is looking at it upside down. If you want open space, if you want accessibility, that needs to be planned first before you put the development on top. What do I mean by that? In terms of every block where you've got office blocks, etc., you need to ensure how each one connects to the other. How is there space in each block to connect to the next one, going to going to the city or going to the railway station, so that you're not just relying on roads, you're looking at interconnected spaces. When you've got brown sites, developers can plan that in, but when you've got different developments, there's no connection between them. So I basically think we need to pause, have a look at what kind of connections can you build outside the road network. How can one block be connected to the other? How can you access it so that it's not just dead office space at the bottom? You have some kind of connection and people can move through different open spaces. Again, have a look at some of the best ones around. Developers plan in terms of how people move around, and that's what's missing in the Cremorne development plan.
I'm really extending my statement from last time, and I say it again. We have these plans, these frameworks. If we don't see them and see them in their phases, some are released, virtually trial and error, to see if they really are working. They will remain on paper as ideas to be argued over till the cows come home. But we really must see that, and we can't just say, oh, and it's going to stop at Cremorne, because the continuity of life now cannot just be a Cremorne statement and then a North Richmond statement and East Richmond statement or a framework. And finally, we have to know that someone is going to pay for this, and when they say we must have this area like that and this area like that, and they might not work and we're not getting test cases and proving exactly what they thought it might cost and what it actually costs, and I don't only mean in money, then we really are putting ourselves for a big failure at the end. So I think frameworks have got to be actually activated at some stage.
So obviously that urban framework report, I think it was tabled last year. I've had a brief look at it. I don't think that many people have. Hasn't been implemented too much at the moment. I think the key ones that stood out for me personally was protecting current residential pockets. Obviously, those that live in Cremorne, and I'm talking Cremorne specifically because this the report is based on, would have seen a lot of developments pop up, particularly still in progress at the moment, and it's affecting the residential pockets. So I think we really need to wind back a little bit here and really protect the current residential pockets we've got rather than see them being ruined. Obviously the commercial zone needs to be changed. I think it should be a mixed zone to really cater for residents as well, have a bit of both. We're in this together with residential and commercial at the moment. We know that. Look around. We've got a big influx of people coming here every day and we've got really great residential pockets. We need to maintain that, and that's one thing the report mentioned that I think we really need to stick to. Outside of that, and as I mentioned before, it's a connectivity to the Yarra corridor. I think we really need to connect with that. At the moment, there's a big concrete wall on the freeway. I understand why it's there. We need to find a way to get into that corridor. As I mentioned before, why can't we have open spaces floating on the Yarra, hospitality even, like they've done in South Bank, and just connect Cremorne a bit better. We've got heavy arterial in Punt Road, Church, Swan, and a concrete wall. Let's connect us to the rest of 3121 a bit better. Thank you.
I believe we should be advocating to the state government to approve the UDF so we can just get on with it and implement some of the good features that it's got. I think ground level setbacks would make a big difference, so increasing the width of the footpaths, especially in the busiest areas, and which will improve the amenity in other ways as well. I think another thing is retaining the character of buildings such as the cherry tree, and so finding those that don't necessarily meet the criteria for heritage, but being able to acknowledge that the community really values these buildings and these spaces. We should be emphasising creating greenery, and so enforcing more trees as part of developments. Another thing is car parking maximums, not car parking minimums. I've got many friends in their 20s and 30s without a car. I think people should be able to choose to live in an apartment that doesn't have a car space. At the moment, that's not an option to them, and they're paying more on their rent or their mortgage as a result. So I'd like to see maximums rather than minimums. And which also has the benefit of reducing excavation works during construction. And lastly, it's about people-oriented streets. So I'm open to working with different street designs, such as shared streets and curbless streets. Thank you.
Thank you again. Final set question for the night before we open it up. This is on the theme of the wonderful world of waste and bins. Could waste collection be done better, particularly considering the context of the tight, narrow streets and varied zones in Lennox?
I guess the first thing is I don't think anybody in this room would disagree with the fact that we just have too many bloody bins. And that is something that we need to change. First thing is Yarra talks about wanting to be best in class, wanting to be the first council to do things. Why don't we do something first with the bins? First thing is cardboard and glass collection. Why don't we take best-in-class examples where we have community bins so that, it's not everybody who has a bin, there are community bins involved. Second, in terms of Cremorne, I know some of the complaints have been that bins stay out all through the week and you literally have to dodge bins. Get companies involved. Let's talk to, bin waste collectors. Work out a schedule that they all collected, say, one afternoon a week down a particular street. People should be taking pride in their streets, should be adopting their streets in terms of the landscape, in terms of how those streets look. So let's get better plans in place to ensure that we don't have as many bins, but also that where we have bins being collected, we don't have, not knowing what the roster is, and you have a set, schedule that everybody follows.
I see three major problems with our waste collection, and one of them is the commercial waste collectors that are not using the council waste collection facilities. They are that dreadful word, cowboys. I've seen them do the most dreadful things. All their waste usually, and I think goes in at once. Like you can hear the glass go in, and then you hear the black bags go in, and then and they all just go in at once. So the supply chain of that waste God knows what's happening. So I think we should actually license waste collectors that are taken on by commercial companies and resources. They can use the council's waste resources, but council only offers it for things like restaurants and other businesses, but not for the general business. So council could do well by at least having a compliance capability that makes these commercial waste much better behaved. They also stop traffic in the middle of the road, and they'll pick up 5 or 6 and stay there 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They're just not in any way got any compliance that costs them. The second is the dumping of waste by other people, I mean furniture, everything like that. Maybe we have to look at some creative compliance problems to find these people that are doing this. The community needs a long discussion on some technologies that could do it, and it might not be suitable, but we need to do something because it's costing a fortune and it makes the whole district very poor. In every back corner you've just got dumped couches and goodness knows what, office chairs particularly. And finally, human waste. It is a disgrace in our parks and our lanes.
Okay, so can it be improved? Short answer is yes. I think the first thing we need to do is change the collection day. In the Lennox ward, that is a Monday morning, and as we know very well, there are businesses that aren't open on the weekends. They put their bins out on the Friday. There are small apartment buildings which can't afford the body corporate double time on a Sunday, so they put it out on the Friday. As we all know, people move around on the weekend, footy fans, people that go to the bars. A lot of them might put their bottles in the bins, ruining all that recycling we've done. At the best case, in the worst case, they're pushing those bins onto the streets. They're cluttering the footpaths. Accessibility is gone. Let's change the collection day to a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday or Friday, and all of a sudden that problem's reduced, all right? On top of that, I know I'm probably stealing Theresa's thunder here, or sorry, complimenting Theresa on this one, but 4 bins. A lot of residents are complaining about that. We've had I think it was 40,000 FOGO bins rolled out over the past year. I think that cost the coffers about $2 million, and residents just aren't too happy about it from what I'm hearing, all right? Why can't we trial a community FOGO area, or even better, educate residents on to create their own worm farm or do their own compost, all right? The feedback I'm hearing from people is that it's too many bins, it's cluttering up the streets, accessibility is poor. I think we can do that a lot better. Thank you.
I'm quite pleased that we're now recycling green waste and we're reducing glass contamination in the commingled recycling. So I think that's a good achievement. But I am quite open-minded about other bin options, such as street bins, like you see in European cities. I think another idea is that we could trial, certainly, is shifting bins off the footpath and onto designated collection spaces. A thought I had more recently that I'd like to admit is that the council really owns the footpath and the road. It's just kind of historical reasons why the road is so big and the footpath is so small. So I think it's a decision of council to force people to put the bins on the footpath, getting in the way of people walking, parents with strollers, people in mobility, scooters. So I'm also open-minded about changing the frequency of collection or changing bin sizes for people with different needs, especially with an increase in the number of bins, making it hard to fit on their property. And I'm also hearing on the topic of waste from residents about about rubbish and broken glass on Swan and Church Streets on the weekend. I'd be keen to explore what could be done, including potentially increasing the availability of staff for an around-the-clock type of response during those busy periods when the street bins are overwhelmed.
It wouldn't be a council candidate meeting without us talking about, rates, roads and rubbish. And speaking to a lot of locals the last month and a half, it's a big issue. A lot of people are having difficulties in all the different pockets of Lennox. The big thing is it's a different problem in each area. In certain areas we've got big roads and bigger footpaths, and it's more of an issue of where you're going to put the bin and how you're going to use it. In other spaces it's actually how we're going to actually get the truck down here at certain times of day and when it needs to be done. So the thing we need to do is we need to have specific solutions for specific problems in each area. There's not one size fits all, and the big thing we've got a one size fits all process at the moment. So how do we change that? Well, the big things are giving options available to people, having green waste collection as an option, and obviously something that we want to try and educate and make sure that people are using as best they can. But if that's not something that's practical, or they're not using it, then what's our alternatives? And that part of that is partly the council's job, is to educate, provide other solutions that we can get green waste out of our regular rubbish bins and into other ways of getting rid of that problem. Our other issue is our general waste around the area. I often see overflowing waste bins. The council bins are often overflowing, especially after the weekends, and it probably requires some changes to the way we go about that program to make sure that those pickups are happening more regularly, and making sure that we're actually getting the outcome we want, which is cleaner streets and a nicer place for us to live. Thank you.
Okay, they were the set questions, so we themed them up to try and make that a broad coverage of issues. We've got about half an hour or a bit less for the rest of you to ask your own questions. As I mentioned, we might have a time for about 5, so just raise your hand if you've got a question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we've got... Well, we'll see if we can sneak at least another one in there. All right, we'll start with, feel free to come up to the microphone, otherwise you can scream it out.
We've heard lots of particularly good ideas about what could and couldn't happen. All right, we've heard lots of good ideas about what we could and couldn't do, joining down to the Yarra, green spaces, better bicycle paths. There's numerous ideas that have been thrown around from all you guys. Love what I'm hearing. How can you actually implement any of this? Because it just takes so long for anything to get done with the council that I've seen 3 design plans and nothing's been done. So let's say joining Cremorne down to the Yarra. Fabulous idea. If that's not actually going to happen, then more time gets wasted talking about it, blah, 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 blah. So how can you guys implement some of these great ideas so that they actually occur rather than you guys are in for, I don't know, what is it, a couple of years? And then we get more people coming up with more ideas, more ideas, more ideas. How do we implement? Thank you.
Okay. 1.5 minutes each, starting with Vicki.
We implement by saying every outcome from that first design framework, that is an outcome in itself. And it must be governed to be implemented in it. So the framework's in place, it gets approval, it gets done. At the moment, our councillors are a marking department for decisions that are already being made or going to be made next week. They are not councillors doing governance, which is risk mitigation. So they must be able to empower the people, the workers that have to actually deliver this thing. We keep blaming council workers or council executives. It is governance that's missing, and that's the council law's problem. They must make a place that gives the metrics that says this framework is working and the community agrees. But the biggest thing of governance is the communication plan. Everything must say, these people must be communicated on every step of the action. And a vision turns in, and when a vision is in place and agreed, it must be aligned to, when eventually the final progress plan is in place, it must say it aligns to Vision 4, Vision 8 and Vision 16. We do not have any tie-up of that at all. Never have and never will be by the looks of things. We have a 2036 vision statement that was made in the year of COVID. Great time to communicate and get the 1,500 people that input to it and a sub-team of 55. And yet that vision is leading us till 2036 from 2020, and it never gets revised. So we need governance, and we need it badly, and it is the responsibility of the councillors.
Great question, because talk's cheap. You want to make sure that we actually get people that are actually going to act on this, right? And you're right, some of these ideas that I've just floated before, connecting to the Yarra, is not cheap. It's going to cost a lot of money. And unfortunately, council budgets aren't that big. The coffers aren't big enough to have such a large project like that. So I think what we need to do first of all is allocate a portion of that through council meeting, make sure we get a big enough vote, and make sure we've got something aligned for it. We then have to lobby with the state government for funding, particularly with Cremorne. That was part of their urban framework report they've come, which came from state government as well. Okay, you need to work with them. You need to push that agenda and lobby for more state government funding, right? And do it together. Maybe even go to the feds if you need to, right? And try to get some more from them. But my whole point is you need to be a voice. You need to be constantly pushing for it. You can't just have a great idea and sit back and go no. And if I am elected, I want to make sure that I'm held accountable for my promises as well and not just sit back and go, too hard, not enough money. So fight in council, fight at state level, get more funding, try to work together. Thank you.
In my professional life, I'm a product owner, and what that means is it's a tech-based role, and I work with customers, so customers of a software product, and with the tech team to deliver something that best fits the customer's needs. For a long period of my time, I've been doing complex problem solving with competing objectives from demanding customers, and so working out with a limited amount of resources what the best thing that we can develop or the best bugs to fix are that we can do that will meet the customer's needs. And it's no different to my work if I'm elected on council. With being an engineer, they teach you budgets, so personally I've got that sort of experience as well. And I think on the fundraising side of things, the council has done a lot of work to increase the financial stability of its books in recent times, and so I'd build on that, and also consider limiting the use, as I mentioned before, of free parking, which is essentially subsidising cars over the other services that people need. And just finally, I'm running with the Greens. I would like to think that the Greens have a strong track record of delivering on their promises at the local level. Sorry. And I think that what you'll get with the Greens is a commitment to the environment, and you'll get a commitment to the things that I've mentioned here in the discussion we've had today. Thank you.
There's a classic quote by John Bric, the captain of the Australia 2 that won the America's Cup, that said, does it make the boat go faster? And so when you look at a council, the job is to get things done. And you've got 4 years to do it as a council member. And if you can't do it, you haven't done your job. So how do you do that? Well, the key is very clearly governance. You've got to have a very clear understanding of how governance works. And coming from a sporting background, that's my job, is to know how the governance systems work to be able to execute on plans. We've got long strategic plans in sport, and the job is to then execute those plans with a transparent accountability. And it's a dirty word in politics and in council for accountability. And at the end of the day, that's how you get things done. If you stand up and put your hand up and say, we're going to get this done in 18 months to 2 years, and you don't, well, whose fault is that? It's only people you can point your finger at is this way. So that's how you get things done. Now, how do you do that in practice? It's about making sure that everyone's moving in the right direction. And that takes collaboration. A lot of the time in these sort of organisations, in councils, you end up with compromise. And guess what compromise means? Nothing. Nothing gets done. You end up with beige, poor decision making and poor execution. In really good systems, it's about collaboration. There's going to be different opinions. People are going to come from different sides of an idea. But what you do is you make sure that the end point is a better outcome by bringing the best bits of each idea and getting to an outcome that actually gets done. Thank you.
It sucks being the shortest person here. As an innovation manager, first thing, fewer, bigger, better. That's the way to do it. The issue is, in terms of fewer, bigger, better, the community needs to have a voice in terms of what those are. So for Cremorne, what are your priorities? We have too many vision, mission, strategy documents that are up here, but don't translate down to what does it look like? What are the plans over the next 5 years? So I would like to see priorities for communities. What does that mean? What is the funding? Not just asking the community about what services you want, what investments are going in terms of capital expenditure. What does the community see as a priority for them? How does that sit with council's statutory requirements, and work out a plan that the community buys into?
Okay, next question. Now, just before I point to the next question, which I think is a couple there, we've been really well behaved most of the time, but just in case, just refrain from anything that might feel like an interjection or a guffaw in the inappropriate. Just for courtesy, and I'll explain why, because the people behind me, all of them, have come here in their own time, and I understand you'd like to make an input, and that's understandable, but it's not appropriate to just be intimidatory, that's all. It's just good manners, that's all. But just so everyone has the same opportunity to feel that they've got something to say. So, having said that, who's got a question? Yep. No, it's behind.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. We do appreciate it, and every now and again we just have normal reactions. My question is, it's all nice that we're talking about all this urban stuff and wonderful ideas and future and mission. I want to talk about something that's not very sexy, but it's rampant, and that is the increased crime in Richmond. And I'm in Lennox ward, and we're experiencing some horrific things going on in the northern part, like after Swan Street. And there isn't a week that doesn't go by that reported crime, burglaries, home invasions, car thefts, bike thefts isn't reported on online social Facebook groups with 20-odd thousand people in it. Now, I personally have experienced it myself. I'm the monitor for my complex's CCTV, and every month I'm called to deal with break-ins of some kind. And I've actually had my next door neighbour, who had a home invasion at 1 o'clock in the morning while they were sleeping. So this is a real issue that's going on. So as nice as it is to have all these urban ideas, we have to also deal with what's happening, and that's our safety. So right now, the police have literally said to us, I feel sorry for anyone living in Richmond, we can't do anything about it. Council doesn't give a damn either. So as councillors, you have a responsibility, or candidates going to be hopefully becoming a councillor, you have a responsibility to ensure safety in our ward, in Richmond. And we know the statistics have just come out, and the City of Yarra has again, is leading the way in crime. So what are you guys going to do about it?
Okay, great question, and you're right. It's good to address the things that aren't so sexy in your terms you used. Look, that's North Richmond, right? Is that what we're talking about? Lennox ward, but you were suggesting the area of the pocket you're talking about.
It's not just about North Richmond, it's all about mental health issues.
Yep.
Organised crime.
Organised crime. Look, that's an issue that's not just affecting 3121, it's affecting the whole of the state at the moment, all right? We're really in a bit of a youth crime spree at the moment, and a bit of a wave, and we need to address that statewide. I would be lobbying with the state government to make sure we get some funding for our areas and try to get increased presence on those pockets that it's really bad. If there's a certain rise in the figures in a certain area, I would have more security there, more people on the beat in that area to try to curb that, all right? Obviously, education in the long game is a big one. We need to try to educate our youth. We need to try to be stronger with our youth, and we need to educate better parenting of that. But that doesn't always happen in a utopian world. I understand that, right? So the best I can offer right now as a councillor is putting pressure on the state government to use some police resources in those hotspots and go from there. That's a start. It's not going to fix it. This is an ongoing issue at the state level. It's been going on and getting worse and worse and worse, right? But that's the best I can offer as a council for now. And hopefully in a couple of years' time it's reduced. And then once it's reduced, we know it's working, we can go further and further from that way. But it is not an easy fix. I'll admit that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I'm sorry to hear about your neighbour's awful experience. I mentioned my former partner, Sean. He was a criminal defence lawyer. He worked for Vicki Legal Aid. I heard many, many stories of the clients he represented. And it's often one of several factors, but from my experience of his stories, it was mental health problems, and it was drug use problems and drug abuse problems. Yeah, look, I might just...
Can we keep the interjections out? We'll keep the chair from... That's all right. We're just letting them record.
Thanks for your clarification. I don't have enough information on me to talk about that aspect, but I do have enough to say about, I guess, petty crime, what you would call it, people, and opportunistic crime. I had my bike stolen from the front of my place. I've had 3 bikes stolen in Richmond. I'm, working up a tally there. And so I think what we really need to be doing for the, for everyone and for the people that, are committing crimes is to invest in local services that are helping people at all levels of government. There's the onus on creating good services, very accessible services for people for mental health, for drug and alcohol addiction, and for other things. And I guess at the council, it's the level of government that is closest to the community. And so I think the council does have a big role to play there.
Thanks for the question. As our other candidate said, it's a complex issue, but at the end of the day, when we look at these sort of issues, we don't, they're all going to be very specific, but the general goal is community engagement. Deterrent is obviously a really important part of that with increased policing. Obviously, as a council, we don't have that control, but we can advocate for communities to make sure those services are provided as needed. I think the biggest thing we have is also making sure that in an inner city community, and remember, these are not problems just for us, this is a community problem in a lot of inner city areas around the world and in Australia, that the way these things improve is making sure that people don't feel disenfranchised, to make sure that people are engaged with the community, and then that knock-on effect is that we then start to see a way that people can find ways to make sure that there's engagement. There's ways that people are looking out for each other, and we then get the ability for police to then come in and support the community at a local level, and then we can provide resources if there are hotspots which have been asked in the question, then we make sure we target those hotspots. But we're not going to get that information if the community is not providing that information as required. So that's probably the most important thing, is that engagement with community and that trust, I suppose, that something will occur to make it get better. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
I thought it was an interesting question because my car was broken into 7 days ago and I didn't bother to report it, purely because I know the drill. The drill is they'll take a report down and it'll be buried. And I think that is part of the issue, is that we need to know what we're doing with these break-ins, and I would suggest there's probably a better way to work out with the police in terms of having something digital, having something online where you can see where there are hotspots. It potentially helps the police as well in terms of increasing patrolling in those areas. Potentially also with police having a look at where there are private security cameras, how are they, do they cover that area, advising residents whether they need security cameras. I think it's going to have to be an ongoing dialogue, but I think technology can help ensure that we are focusing the police in terms of their scarce resources on areas that need a bit more oversight.
Once again, we're talking about not collecting the data, centralising it. It's on, obviously, a community website. It should be the governance. This is a reputational risk to Yarra, a safety risk to Yarra citizens. So it immediately becomes a Yarra issue to the extent of at least collecting the data, even if it's hearsay data, not official police data, to start getting a profile of exactly what's going on. Once again, a government issue to make sure the reputation for the shareholders and the customers of Yarra, which are you, have the facts to bear. And then police will take an interest, believe me, if there's a proper centralised official base of attacks, of bad actions, whatever they might be. Some of them might not be quite as bad as they are, but at least they're noted, and it's an instant report that would happen in any organisation, but it must be centralised, and Yarra should be acting on that first of all, to find out what is the problem, and then you can go into negotiations with police, with state government or anyone else. But once again, it's a responsibility of the councillors to say, Yarra, we must start looking into this because this is an issue that's affecting a lot of people.
Right. Thank you again. We'll try your question.
I've been here 35 years plus in Melbourne, now in the Lennox area. I've had quite a bit to do with the council over the years. It's an interesting story. But what I've noticed over the last few years is a lack of response by council. They are them. You will do what we say. That's not on. I'm going to throw something a little bit different into the mix. I'm going to ask each of the prospective councillors, and I congratulate you for having the intestinal fortitude to stand up and try and get something done about it. But what I would like to ask them individually, would you be prepared to take the CEO and the senior managers of Yarra Council and put them on 2-year contracts? And if they don't perform, they're out. I'll ask the question to you one at a time, individually, as a yes or a no answer. No questions. Thank you.
Just a yes or no.
It's a very fascinating question. Thank you. Look, if you're going to force me to yes, you really want a yes or a no. I think I'm going to say a yes, but. I think the but there is we've already got some measures in place, such as KPIs for the CEO, and I think that they, their role is to incentivise the CEO and the council staff, especially the senior ones, to be performing in line with the councillor expectations and, of course, the community expectations.
Clearly, if I'm standing on a platform of accountability and the person that I'm trying to, that I get to pick as a councillor is the CEO, the only people we get to talk to as councillors is the CEO, our direct report from administration, we need to hold them accountable as well. So yes.
I'd just like to point out that we actually had customer satisfaction as one of the key KPIs. I noticed that it actually disappeared from the CEO's KPIs when it dropped below 70. Now we're around 50, so I would definitely like to see that back. And yes, dropping below 70 in terms of customer satisfaction is sackable in my view.
Yes, because the CEO is already on such a contract. But once again, the councillors are meant to enforce those capabilities that she's meant to show or deliver, and they are not enforced by the councillors. So she is on that contract, and that's exactly what should be happening. So yes.
Yes, and it should have happened years ago.
All right. Snappy questions are good. We'll grab a question there, and I think there was one or two here. So do you want to jump up?
I want to thank you all for your time tonight. It's been very informative, and I think we've learned a lot out of most of the or all of the candidates here. I come from a finance background. I've run some very big businesses over the last 20 years or so. We run on budgets. We don't automatically increase our sales prices or our fees just because our expenses are running out of control. We manage to cut things to create profits. We've seen over the years there's a number of rate rises. We've seen bin taxes pushed out of general rates into an additional revenue source for the councils, just to fund the expenditure there. I take your point there. We are very top heavy here in the City of Yarra compared to all councils in Victoria. Very top heavy. We have an executive team loaded with ex-Darebin councillors, following their CEO. Things have got to stop at the top level. We also got to. I guess my main question is, along with your question before, what are you going to do at the top level of salary range in the City of Yarra, and what are you going to do to stop the things you're not responsible really for, the special projects that have been run? So I'll leave that to you. Thank you.
As always, it always comes down to money, and in a limited resource environment, the most important thing is making sure you can read a budget. I'm not sure a lot of people on council know how to read the thing. I've spent a lot of time working on limited resource systems and how do you get the most bang for your buck. And the big thing, we've got an upside down pyramid in our council, and so the first thing we need to do is review that very clearly and see where we're getting our value from. And if we're not getting that value, we need to change it, and that's a really important first step that I would be advocating if I get in to council. Is the first thing we do is we do a full budget review and make sure that we're actually spending money where we should be, rather than wasting money on people and services that we're not getting any value from. And the second part to that is making sure that the first answer, what we've found is that the first answer is get the money from the ratepayers. That's the first way of dealing things, rather than actually going, where can we make sure that we're balancing out the costs and the expenses to the ratepayer and giving them value for the service that we bring as a council. Thank you.
Good question, and I would also say that as far as council's concerned, you vote independent and the writing's on the wall. The CEO knows what's coming. So in terms of costs, absolutely, council is top heavy. Now, as councillors, obviously you can't tell the CEO how to run their organisation, but you can ask for plans in terms of how those changes are going to be made. Up to the CEO in terms of how they implement it, in terms of how they bring overheads down, but we need to see a plan in terms of bringing overheads down. We've already got the Atticus report, so we know what some of the issues are. It's been painted in black and white. The changes that the CEO has put in has veered towards raising costs, raising rates in terms of putting in the additional bin tax, for example, increasing over CPI a lot of services. It has to go the other way. We need to cut overheads because, as you say, in the corporate world, in the private sector, that's what you do. You can't keep raising rates. So.
We have total lack of transparency on exactly what is spent, and I went through every line of the budget that was out 4 months ago, 3 months ago, I can't remember. We have extraordinary line items that we're paying for, which are total state and federal responsibilities. We do not, but it is up to communication back to the community to say, do you really want that line item there? I mean, I don't know why we're spending $200,000 on negotiations for the treaty. It's a state government treaty. I have no idea why we're doing that, but it is the community has to be informed enough with transparency to say, look at the budget, then ask for the actuals from last year and say, is this right? Is that what we really want? And maybe it is. Maybe it is. But at the moment, there are myriads of line items in that budget that are state or federal responsibilities. And we can have no possible outcome that's going to deliver to the people that those line items are meant to be addressing. And if we can't deliver an outcome for them, why are we spending money on it? It's unfair to them and it's unfair to us.
So during my small campaign, I've been really pushing for a complete urgent overhaul audit of the financial department of the council, right? I'm not alone on that as well. Independents from a lot of the other wards are pushing for a complete audit as well of the finances. And if I am elected, I'll be pushing for that for a vote so that we can put a full comprehensive audit report, give that to those in charge, the CFO, and let's make some changes. Let's make some recommendations. Let's make some urgent changes, and let's change the way it's being used at the moment. As people have mentioned before, they're slugging to us, the residents, with an extra bin tax, with more raises of rates here, and they're not giving themselves a pay cut. They're not trimming their own, all right? They're charging us for their own poor performance, and it's not on, all right? I'm over it. Everyone's over it here tonight. I can see that you're definitely over it, all right? As Vicki said before, there needs to be pressure on the state government to pay up on the certain situations that they're liable for, and I'll use the injecting room up in Lennox Street over there. That is a state issue. They've chosen to put it there. They need to reimburse us in the Lennox ward. It's not just the Lennox ward, it's Richmond, 3121. They need to reimburse us to have more money to put more resources there to clean it up, all right? We need to put more pressure to get more money from state and federal, and we also need to be better on our quotes. What I find is that when we do a little renovation in our backyard, we go through several quotes. We want to find the most competitive quote. We want to save some money. Council's not doing that, and they need to do more of it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm a big believer in participatory democracy, and as the budget is the kind of the biggest statement of intents for how the council prioritises various services, I think it's the most important consultation that occurs. And so I think that if I'm elected, I would be looking for ways to improve the consultation process with where the money is getting spent, what services are the most benefit to the community, which aren't. I think the council has done fairly well with reducing debt, so it's been paying that down recently, and so I'd like to see that continue. In terms of insourcing and outsourcing, I would prefer to invest in people, so insourcing services rather than outsourcing them. I think the council can maintain a better control over what's happening through an insourced model rather than an outsourced model. And just to touch on your point about wages, I think on the open market, you do require high wages to attract the best people. So in terms of salary, I wouldn't be arguing that point. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Right. Nearly as short as you are. That's all right. Yeah. Making a gag. I think our last couple of questions here we might sneak in. Would you like to jump up? Sorry? So you need to ask the question, or did you want to talk it?
How are we going to do all this? The most important person is not here tonight, the State Minister for Local Government. The State Cabinet decides what local government does, how much we can raise in rates, and so on. Whether Australia Post could build their headquarters in Burnley without going to the local government. I would like to hear what the candidates propose to do to strengthen our connection with the state government and particularly the Minister for Local Government. Has he ever been to Richmond? Does he know what we want? Is there a committee of Yarra Council that monitors all the policy decisions that are being taken on our behalf in State Cabinet? Thank you.
I feel like I'm starting off all the time. I definitely think you're right. Technically, council is not a separate level of government. It's an extension of the state government. First thing, yes, we do need to build better relationships with state government. I presume, well, everybody in their corporate life knows that when you go up to the boss to ask for things, it better be bloody important. And one of the things that I think we do too much of is we tend to ask the state government for various things. Some statement on something that is not as relevant to everybody. And I basically think fewer, bigger, better works with state government. We need to prioritize things like their share of expenses. We need to prioritize things like social housing in the area. How are we going to collaborate with them to build more social housing? We lost a lot of our cred with state government when we turned down, when the current lot of councillors turned down social housing around Collingwood Town Hall. We need to get those relationships back, and we need to work with state government to deliver on some of the big initiatives. The big one on the agenda is stormwater drains. We know that's going to be one of the big challenges in the next 4 years. We need state funding. There is a lot of money that's going to go into that. We need to prioritize what we keep asking state for.
The actual Local Government Act and the ability of state government to influence is probably overdone. It's really been our weakness not to push back on state government actually making us do things that they have no right to make us do. But that we've not been forceful enough to say, I'm sorry, that's in your domain, your payment, your rights, your responsibilities, and you're accountable for it, so you're going to be responsible for it. But we don't push back because, once again, that's a councillor's role. The executive can't sit there and tell state government. There's a Local Government Act. The state government actually sets up, obviously, through Parliament. Remember, the biggest funding outside your rates and the extra fees that are coming along is actually from the Commonwealth. And really, once again, the councillors should stay and work with other councils, because every other council's in the exact same position. The state government is pushing and pushing with their high debt, and we are not refusing to take as hard as we could if we combined with other councils and just said it's not going to happen anymore.
So I definitely agree with Theresa. Council needs to strengthen its relationships with the state government. We really need to work with them, and we need to keep them accountable as well. Councillors, they're a... Why should you vote for me? Look, I won't sell myself too much. I'm an independent though. I'm not aligned to any political party. I'm not on any board. I'm not invested by any backing at all. So I'm completely independent, and that's sort of why I throw my hand up at the moment. I feel like there aren't enough independents in council at the moment, and we need more of them. So I can guarantee you that. But the reality is, I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to sell myself and talk about all the great things I am. The reality is, because there's not many. I think the reality is I just want everyone to really think about their vote this year, all right? It's a very important election. Your vote's important. You need to really do some research. Just take 10 minutes out of your day. Go check out all the candidates. Read up on them. Their numbers and their emails are public knowledge. You can call them up if you need to, right? We've obviously, the five of us are here today. We've spoken a bit about ourselves. You can gauge where we're at. But do your homework on the two that weren't here, all right? Peter Razos and Andrew Davies. Do some homework on them. Find out about their policies. Do your own due diligence, and then make your decision what you think is best for yourself and where you live in your jurisdiction, right? If everyone does that, we'll be fine, okay? I'm not going to tell you a how to vote card. I think that you can just make that decision once you've done all your research on the candidates. We've all got Instagram pages. We've all put our policies out there. We've all got our numbers out there. Mine's there at least if you want to call me and find out anything more. So do your due diligence, and let's make sure we get the best vote this election.
I've lived in various parts of Richmond since 2015, and I've been fortunate enough to buy a place to call home down the road from the beloved Rowena Corner Store, and it's this personal, long-term investment in the area that drives me to make our community as good as it can be. I hope I've done a reasonable job of communicating who I am and what my values are and what I'll do if elected. But further to that, running with the Greens gives the community a sense of what my values are and knowledge that I'll act accordingly with those values. When you vote for me, you know you'll get someone who will always put people before profit, will never accept corporate donations, will work tirelessly to mitigate the climate crisis and protect nature, will stand up for renters, public housing residents, and support more affordable housing, and will always support our diverse community, no matter who you are, where you're from, or who you love. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone for coming along tonight, and to my fellow Lennox ward candidates, to Gary and the rest of the Cremorne Community Inc for putting the Meet the Candidates event on. Thanks for having me.
I think about what makes a really great councillor, and it's somebody who's available for their community. It's someone who, you know, you have their number or their email address these days and you call them. That's what, I grew up in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. We could do that. We knew the council guy. If there was a problem with the street, we called him. And that's kind of the kind of old school councillor that I'd like to be. I'd like to be the person that in my area, and even not in my area, the whole of Yarra, if you've got a problem and you need someone who can help you, I think with my network and my connections in the community, I'll at least, if I don't have the answer, I know someone who can. And that's really, I think, a really important trait that a really good councillor has, and I think it's a really good trait that I have. As I've said at the start, it's about transparency, good governance, communication and accountability, and that's what I think we've been missing for a long time in all levels of government, definitely local council. And so if you elect me, if you're looking for someone who's going to be able to provide that with no political affiliations, an independent person who's only really here because I want to live in a really great place. That's why I want to do it. And if I can help to do that by using my skill set to drive that process, engage with the community, engage with the council, engage with key stakeholders to make sure that the decisions that drive that process forward are actually happen, rather than just be words on a page, which has been a lot of the case in the past. Thank you. And thanks for coming.
I have a vision for 3121. One of the things that we suffer from is that we don't have the kind of power that, say, Fitzroy has. And the reason we don't is because as a community, we don't come together. To me, this election was about, yes, getting an independent local councillor in, getting other independents, to stand, but starting that process of building community. So in terms of our councillors, if you see me as your local, your independent, you see my skills and you think that that's the best fit, please vote for me. I think that's a great starting point in terms of building community. However, if there are other independents that you gel better with, please vote for them. My plea to all of you is, let's get locals, let's get independents in. Let's start building 3121. Let's start building the kind of power that, say, a Fitzroy has, because that's the only way we are going to be building this area in terms of infrastructure, services, and community.
My pitch to you is that I'm putting principles, not promises, I suppose, to be a councillor, because I don't know what next year will bring or the year after down to specific promises to be made. But the principles are, and I was amazed to find, that there is a common law for an elected representative of you, and that is to act fairly and fight natural bias. And I have not seen that in many elected representatives, so that they can make well known their natural biases, which every one of us has, that when they're making decisions that affect the rights and interests of others. Now, that is a common law, and I will do my damn best to declare my natural biases when I see them arise, to make sure that this leads to I am totally independent. It is used a lot. It's been interesting in the last weeks. I've been asked to make pledges to all sorts of unions and groups I can't even find any information on. And I'm sorry, a solemn promise, and that's what a pledge is something I will not enter into with a group of people I really cannot commit to thoroughly when I promise you I'm committing to you. That's what I have to do, and I have absolutely no allegiances to other groups, parties, businesses. And finally, Fed State has no place. Yarra resources for Yarra services, not federal and state services. And finally, it is services that we are. It is in the Act. We deliver services and bylaws. And there's 91 of them that we have to look after in Yarra. We have to cull them probably, but that's what I'll be doing. Thank you.
Well, that was the final word from our candidates. So I'd like to just broadly ask you to give the candidates a round of applause. So thank you all for coming along. Obviously, only one of them will be the ultimate representative of Lennox Ward, and that does include, once again, Andrew Davies and Peter Razos, who we will be getting some input from, and actually already have provided some input. What we will do, and we again, Cremorne Community Inc, and we'll put it on our website. We have been filming, and we've asked each of the candidates for their acknowledgement that they're happy with the filming. So we'll make that available, and we expect to invite each of the candidates also to just simply, along the lines of the questions we've asked, to note their responses again. So we'll package that up and put that on the cremorne.org website as well. So you'll have that. Thank you all for coming, each of you, on a Wednesday night, and along with the pub, and Nathan with the cherry tree. Make sure you spend enough money for them so they get to take advantage of your enjoyment of their hospitality. And once again, if you live in Cremorne or work in Cremorne, please follow up and join us, and that'll just help our sustainability in poking the powers that be again. So once again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the night.